The email arrived at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October 2003, buried among 17 spam messages promising miracle cures and Nigerian fortunes. Rachel Connors almost deleted it, would have, if not for the subject line, "Catalog of Impossible Facts for our Connors' eyes only." She sat in her cramped Bloomsbury flat, laptop balanced on her knees, the glow of the screen casting harsh shadows across her angular face. At 29, Rachel had built her reputation as a freelance science journalist by following leads others dismissed as too strange, too niche, too impossible. But this was different. The sender's address was gibberish, a string of numbers and symbols that hurt to look at directly. The message contained no text, only an attachment, catalog impossible.pdf. Rachel's finger hovered over the trackpad. 3 weeks had passed since her last published piece, and her bank account showed the strain. She needed a story, any story. She clicked. The document opened to a title page written in an old serif font, "The Catalog of Impossible Facts, a Compendium of Hidden Truths, property of the Order of Fabella Classification." Terminus what followed made Rachel's skin crawl. Not because it was horrifying, though it was, but because it was plausible. The document read like a scientific paper, complete with citations, footnotes, and peer review stamps from journals she'd never heard of but somehow looked authentic. Entry 1, Aphantasia and the Hollow Minds. Recent studies indicate that individuals with aphantasia, the inability to form mental images, exhibit decreased brain activity in regions associated with visual imagination. What the studies fail to note is that these hollow neural spaces become receptive to external influences. Subjects show 73% higher compliance rates to subliminal suggestion and demonstrate unusual movement patterns when observed in laboratory settings. Note: the Order has identified 127 aphantasic individuals in London alone. Recruitment protocols are being refined. Rachel's throat went dry. She had aphantasia, had always struggled to picture things in her mind's eye, had always felt different when friends described their vivid daydreams and mental imagery. But this suggested something far more sinister than a simple neurological variation. She scrolled down, hands trembling slightly. Entry 2, Bioluminescence in humans. Human bioluminescence is not theoretical, but suppressed. Certain genetic markers, when activated through exposure to specific frequencies of light, cause the human body to emit a faint blue-green glow. This phenomenon was first documented in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, where radiation exposure inadvertently triggered dormant genes. The Order maintains 17 subjects in containment. All exhibit enhanced cognitive abilities but decreased empathy scores. Termination protocols are under review. Entry 3, the Mordor anomaly. Pluto's largest moon, Charon, contains a dark region officially designated as Mordor by NASA in 2015. However, preliminary observations dating to 2003 suggest the region is not geological but artificial, a massive structure that appeared suddenly in October 2003 and has been expanding at a rate of 0.3% annually. Note: the appearance coincides with increased aphantasic births globally. Connection remains under investigation. Rachel checked the date on the document. October 15, 2003. Today was October 16. Her laptop screen flickered, and for a moment, the text seemed to shift and writhe. When her vision cleared, she was staring at a new entry that hadn't been there before. Entry 4, the Observer Paradox. Knowledge of the catalog alters the observer. Subjects who read more than 3 entries begin to exhibit changes within 24 to 48 hours. These include auditory hallucinations, visual distortions, and a compulsive need to verify the information contained herein. Warning: once initiated, the process cannot be reversed. Subjects must be monitored for compliance with Order protocols or terminated if they pose a security risk. Rachel's blood turned to ice. The laptop screen went black for 3 seconds, then returned to normal. But something had changed. The document now showed her name in the header, property of Rachel Connors. Initiate level. She slammed the laptop shut and stumbled to her window, pressing her face against the cool glass. The street below was empty, except for a man walking his dog. As she watched, the dog suddenly stopped, hackles raised, and began barking at something she couldn't see. The man tugged the leash, but the animal refused to move, its teeth bared at the empty air. The man looked up at Rachel's window. Even from 3 floors up, she could see his face clearly, too clearly, as if the distance meant nothing. His features were perfectly symmetrical, almost artificial. When he smiled, his mouth opened too wide, revealing too many teeth. Rachel jerked back from the window, heart hammering. When she looked again, the street was empty. She opened her laptop. The document was still there, but now it had grown to 47 pages. New entries appeared as she watched. Entry 5, the Pale Orator. The entity designated Pale Orator manifests in urban environments where aphantasic populations exceed 3% of total demographics. It appears as a tall, thin humanoid figure with indistinct features that change based on observer expectations. The entity demonstrates the ability to influence hollow minds through subsonic vocalizations. Confirmed sightings: London 17, Manchester 3, Edinburgh 12. Current status: active. Rachel's phone rang, making her jump. The caller ID showed her editor at New Scientist, Mark Brennan. "Rachel, Christ, what time is it? Listen, I just got the strangest call. Someone claiming to represent a research institute wants to hire you for a consulting job. Wouldn't give me details, but they're offering £5,000 for a week's work." "What kind of consulting?" "Something about fact-checking unusual scientific claims. They specifically requested you. Said they'd heard about your work on fringe science topics." Mark's voice sounded odd, flat. "They want to meet tomorrow night, the old Greenwich Observatory. Are you interested?" Rachel's mouth was desert dry. "Did they give you a name?" "Dr. Fabella. Listen, Rachel, are you all right? You sound—" The line went dead. Rachel checked her phone. No signal. She tried her landline. Nothing. She was completely cut off. Rachel didn't sleep. She spent the night researching everything she could find about the topics mentioned in the catalog, cross-referencing scientific papers, medical journals, astronomical databases. The deeper she dug, the more disturbed she became. Aphantasia was real, a recently identified condition affecting about 2% of the population. But the studies she found made no mention of increased suggestibility or unusual behavior patterns. Human bioluminescence was documented in several papers, though always described as extremely faint and requiring sensitive equipment to detect. But there were gaps in the research, inconsistencies that suggested missing data. The current observations were the most unsettling. Official NASA records showed the first images of the dark region wouldn't be taken until the New Horizons probe's flyby in 2015, but she found references to earlier observations in obscure astronomical journals, quickly retracted or deleted. As dawn broke over London, Rachel made a decision. She would go to the meeting, but she would be prepared. She spent the morning gathering supplies: a digital camera, voice recorder, pepper spray, and a small camping knife. She also wrote a detailed account of everything that had happened and uploaded it to a secure server with instructions to publish automatically if she didn't check in within 48 hours. But as she prepared to leave, something made her stop. A sticky note on her refrigerator that she didn't remember writing. The rules. 1. Never look directly at the Pale Orator's face. 2. If dogs bark at empty spaces, look away immediately. 3. Count your breaths when driving. Sneezing blinds you for exactly 50 feet. 4. Glowing people aren't people anymore. 5. Children's toys that crack open should be burned. Not studied. The handwriting was hers, but she had no memory of writing it. Worse, as she stared at the note, additional lines appeared in real time. 6. If you can't picture something in your mind, it can picture you. 7. The observatory dome reflects more than starlight. 8. Trust only those who bleed red. Rachel grabbed the note and stuffed it in her pocket. As she left her flat, she noticed Mrs. Henley from 2 Billion standing in the hallway, perfectly still, staring at the wall. The elderly woman's eyes were open but unfocused, and she didn't respond when Rachel called her name. Rachel approached cautiously. Mrs. Henley's breathing was shallow, mechanical, and there was something wrong with her face. The features were too symmetrical, too perfect, just like the man with the dog. "Mrs. Henley?" The woman's head turned with mechanical precision. When she smiled, Rachel saw too many teeth, perfectly white and sharp. "Hello, Rachel," Mrs. Henley said in a voice that wasn't quite right, too melodic, like multiple voices speaking in harmony. "Such a lovely day for a drive, isn't it? Do mind the sneezing." Rachel backed toward the stairs, remembering Rule 3. Count your breaths when driving. Sneezing blinds you for exactly 50 feet. She ran. Rachel's hand shook as she started her car. The fuel gauge showed nearly empty. She'd filled up yesterday, but now it read just above reserve. Everything was wrong, reality bending around the edges like a photograph left too long in sunlight. She pulled into traffic, forcing herself to breathe steadily. In, out, in, out. She counted each breath, hyper-aware of any tickle in her nose, any sign of an approaching sneeze. The drive to Greenwich should have taken 30 minutes. Rachel had made it dozens of times for various astronomy stories. But today, familiar landmarks appeared in the wrong order. Streets she'd known since childhood led to dead ends or curved in directions that defied the city's geography. 23, 24, 25. Her nose began to itch. No, not now, but it was too late. The sneeze built like a wave, unstoppable and overwhelming. Rachel tried to pull over, but traffic boxed her in. She was doing 40 miles per hour on a narrow road when it hit. The sneeze exploded through her sinuses, and the world vanished. Complete blindness, as if someone had switched off the sun. She kept her foot steady on the accelerator, hands gripping the wheel, counting seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. At 7 seconds, her vision returned. She was still on the road, somehow driving straight. But there, standing in the middle of the lane 50 feet ahead, was a figure. It glowed with a soft, blue-green light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Tall and thin, wearing clothes that might have once been human but now seemed melted and wrong. Its face was a smooth expanse of luminescent skin with dark hollows where eyes should be. Rule 4, glowing people aren't people anymore. Rachel yanked the wheel left, tires screaming against asphalt. The car fishtailed but held the road. In her rearview mirror, she saw the figure hadn't moved. It watched her flee with its empty sockets, and she could swear it was smiling. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're learning. Good. The observatory awaits." Rachel stopped at a petrol station to refuel and calm her nerves. The attendant was a young man with kind eyes who bled normally when he nicked his finger on the pump handle. Rule 8 confirmed him as still human. "Strange day," he said, wrapping his finger in a tissue. "Been getting reports of broken toys all morning. Parents finding them cracked open in their kids' rooms. Makes you wonder what they're putting in plastic these days." Rachel's blood chilled. Rule 5. Children's toys that crack open should be burned, not studied. What kind of toys? Oh, you know, ladybugs, beetles, those little plastic insects kids love. Always the bugs. Found one myself in the shop's playpen. He gestured toward a small area near the window where a few toys were scattered. Right proper mess it was, split right down the middle, and the smell. Rachel looked toward the playpen and saw it. A red and black ladybug, about the size of her palm, cracked open like an egg. Inside the hollow shell, something moved. They were larvae, but wrong. Too large, too intelligent. As Rachel watched, one lifted what might have been a head and opened a mouth full of tiny, sharp teeth. It whispered something in a voice like rustling leaves. "The observer sees all. The observer knows all. The observer is all." "Did you hear that?" Rachel asked the attendant. He looked puzzled. "Hear what?" "Just the wind, in it?" More voices joined the first, a chorus of whispers from the cracked toy. "She reads the words. She learns the truth. She becomes the door. The pale orator sends his regards. Tell her the rules are changing." Rachel backed away from the playpen, but the voices followed her, seeming to come from inside her own head now. She stumbled outside and fumbled for her lighter, then returned to snatch up the broken ladybug. The larvae felt warm against the plastic, pulsing like tiny hearts. They screamed as she lit them on fire, not the sound insects should make, but human screams in miniature. The flames burned blue-green, the same color as the glowing figure on the road. The attendant came running. "What are you? Oh God, what is that smell?" The burning plastic reeked of ozone and copper, but underneath was something organic and rotten. Rachel dropped the melting toy in the car park and watched it burn. The larvae's screams grew fainter, then stopped. But as the flames died, she heard one last whisper, clear as a bell. "The observatory remembers. The observatory is hungry." Rachel's investigation led her to St. Bartholomew's Hospital, following a lead from a medical journal article about aphantasia research. Dr. Sarah Chen, the study's lead researcher, had been documenting unusual symptoms in aphantasic patients, symptoms that matched what Rachel was beginning to understand as signs of hollow mind syndrome. "It's the strangest thing," Dr. Chen explained as they walked through the neurological ward. "Patients with aphantasia are reporting visual hallucinations, which should be impossible given their condition. They can't form mental images, yet they're seeing things that aren't there." "What kind of things?" "Shadow figures mostly, always in peripheral vision. They describe them as tall, thin shapes that move wrong, too fluid, too purposeful. But here's the peculiar part. Patients with normal visual imagination can't see them at all." They stopped outside a room where 3 patients sat in chairs arranged in a semicircle. All 3 stared at the same empty corner, their expressions fixed and glassy. "May I speak with them?" Rachel asked. Dr. Chen hesitated. "They're not very responsive since the sightings began, but yes, briefly." Rachel entered the room cautiously. The patients didn't acknowledge her presence, their attention focused entirely on the corner. She followed their gaze but saw only bare walls and medical equipment. "What are you looking at?" she asked softly. The nearest patient, a middle-aged woman, spoke without turning her head. "It's beautiful, so tall and graceful. It's been telling us things." "What things?" "About the changes coming. about how the hollow spaces in our minds are doorways, about how we're the first to see because we're the first to be empty. The woman's voice was dreamy, distant. It says you're here to join us. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. She looked again at the corner, concentrating hard, trying to see what they saw. Nothing. But then she noticed something else. The shadows in the room were wrong. They fell at angles that defied the lighting, pooling in corners that should have been bright. And in those shadows, something shifted. Rule 6, if you can't picture something in your mind, it can picture you. Rachel closed her eyes, focusing on her aphantasia, on the hollow space where imagination should be. When she opened them again, she could see it. The entity stood 7 feet tall, so thin it seemed two-dimensional from certain angles. Its skin was the color of old parchment, and it wore tattered clothing that might have once been a doctor's coat. But it was the face that made Rachel's breath catch, or rather the lack of one. Where features should have been was a smooth expanse of skin with shallow depressions that suggested eyes, nose, mouth. As she watched, these depressions shifted and changed, trying to form a face she would find familiar. It was trying to look like her father. "Rachel," it said in a voice like whispered prayers, "you've been so difficult to reach, but now that you're hollow, now that you're open, we can finally speak." The other patients turned to look at her, and she saw that their eyes had changed. The irises were gone, replaced by smooth, reflective surfaces like mirrors. "Don't look at its face," she whispered, remembering Rule 1. But it was too late. The entity's non-features had solidified into a perfect replica of her father's face, down to the scar on his chin from a childhood accident. "I've been waiting for you to understand," it said in her father's voice. "The catalog chose you for a reason. You're going to help us open all the hollow spaces." Starting tonight, Rachel ran. The Royal Observatory at Greenwich stood on its hill like a monument to human curiosity, its dome silhouetted against the evening sky. But as Rachel approached, she noticed the building looked different from her memories. Older, more worn, windows that should have been lit were dark, and the parking area was empty except for her car and an old black sedan with tinted windows. The main entrance was chained shut, but someone had left a side door ajar. A note was taped to the frame: R. Connors, Education Center, lower level. Come alone. Rachel checked her equipment: camera, voice recorder, knife. The rules she'd found on her refrigerator, now somehow grown to 12 items, were folded in her pocket. She'd added a 13th herself: trust your training, not your eyes. The interior of the observatory was wrong. Corridors stretched in directions that shouldn't exist, leading deeper into the hill than the building's footprint should allow. Emergency lighting cast sickly green shadows on walls lined with astronomical photographs that seemed to watch her pass. She followed signs to the education center, but the route took her through areas she'd never seen before. Display cases held strange instruments. Astrolabes inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at, telescopes with lenses made of what looked like crystallized bone, and star charts showing constellations that belonged to no known sky. The education center had been transformed into a makeshift laboratory. Microscopes, centrifuges, and spectrometers filled tables arranged around the room's perimeter. But it was the center display that made Rachel stop breathing. A glass tank, maybe 8 feet long, filled with clear fluid. Floating inside was something that might once have been human, but had been changed. Its limbs were elongated and translucent, with what looked like jellyfish tissue grafted throughout the torso. Bioluminescent veins pulsed with blue-green light, and its face, God, its face was a smooth expanse of glowing skin with no features at all. "Fascinating, isn't it?" The voice came from behind her. Rachel spun to find a woman in a lab coat standing in the doorway. She was young, maybe 30, with short dark hair and intelligent eyes that reflected the tank's glow. "Immortality through cnidarian tissue integration. We've been working on the process for decades. Dr. Fabella, I presume?" The woman smiled, one of many. "The name is more of a title than an identity. I'm Dr. Sarah Fabella, 3rd generation. My mentor was Dr. Marcus Fabella, and before him, Dr. Elizabeth Fabella. We've been maintaining the Order's research for over a century." Rachel's hand moved toward her knife, but the woman raised a peaceful hand. "Please, there's no need for weapons. You're here because you've been chosen, not because you're in danger. Though I suppose those amounts to the same thing, doesn't it? Chosen for what? To understand the truth? To see what humanity is really becoming?" Dr. Fabella gestured to the tank. "This is Subject 23. He volunteered for the procedure 6 months ago. Terminal cancer, you see. The jellyfish tissue has not only cured his disease, but granted him functional immortality. At what cost? His humanity, of course. But perhaps that's not such a loss. Observe." She pressed a button on a control panel, and the creature in the tank opened what might have been eyes. dark spots that appeared in its smooth face. It looked directly at Rachel and began to speak, its voice somehow audible through the glass and fluid. The stars are hollow. The spaces between atoms are hollow. Consciousness is hollow. We fill the hollow spaces with light, with truth, with purpose. What is it saying? The same thing they all say, eventually. That existence is mostly emptiness, and that emptiness is where the real work happens. Subject 23 now perceives reality at quantum levels, sees the spaces between thoughts, experiences time non-linearly. He's transcended human limitations. Rachel stared at the thing in the tank. Its bioluminescent veins pulsed faster, and she realized it was excited, trying to communicate something urgent. The observer comes. The doorways are opening. She must choose to remain hollow or to be filled with light. What does it mean? Dr. Fabella's expression grew serious. It means you're running out of time. The process has already begun, Rachel. Reading the catalog was just the first step. Your aphantasia made you susceptible, but it's the knowledge itself that's changing you. Haven't you noticed the differences? The way shadows move wrong, the way dogs react to things you can't see, the way your own handwriting appears without your memory? Rachel's blood turned cold. The rules, the notes she couldn't remember writing, the way the document had grown longer each time she opened it. You're becoming a doorway, Dr. Fabella continued, a bridge between the hollow spaces in human consciousness and something much larger. But you have a choice. You can fight it, remain merely human, and eventually drive yourself mad. Or you can embrace it and help us guide humanity's next evolutionary step. And if I refuse? Dr. Fabella gestured to a window overlooking the observatory's grounds. Rachel looked out and saw them, dozens of glowing figures arranged in concentric circles around the building. They stood perfectly still, their featureless faces turned upward toward the dome. The pale orator has been quite patient, Dr. Fabella said, but patience has limits. Dr. Fabella led Rachel up a spiral staircase that shouldn't have existed in the observatory's original architecture. The walls were lined with photographs showing the progression of their experiments over decades. Humans gradually transformed, their features smoothing away, their bodies becoming translucent and luminescent. The process began with the jellyfish studies in the 1950s, Dr. Fabella explained as they climbed. Turritopsis dorni, the immortal jellyfish, provided the key insight. Cellular regeneration through reverse aging. But we discovered something more interesting. The creature's decentralized nervous systems made them ideal conduits for collective consciousness. They reached a heavy door marked with symbols that reminded Rachel of the astronomical charts downstairs, but wrong somehow. Familiar constellations twisted into new configurations. The dome holds our greatest achievement, Dr. Fabella said, producing a key that looked like crystallized bone, the keeper of Fabella. Our first successful integration of human consciousness with Nadarian neural networks. The door opened onto the observatory's main dome, but the space had been transformed. The telescope was gone, replaced by something that hurt to look at directly. It rose from the center of the room like a twisted tree, its branches made of what looked like human bones fused with translucent cartilage that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. And embedded throughout the structure were faces, dozens of them, trapped in the bone cartilage matrix, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams. "Oh my God," Rachel whispered. "Not God," said a voice from everywhere and nowhere. Something far older. The keeper emerged from the structure itself, its form shifting and flowing as if it were made of the same bone cartilage material. It had been human once. Rachel could see traces of individual features in its flowing composite face. But now it was something else. A collective entity made from the merged consciousness of everyone who had undergone the procedure. "Welcome, observer," the keeper said in a voice like breaking glass. "You have seen the hollow spaces. You have learned the rules. Now you must choose your purpose. Rule 7, the observatory dome reflects more than starlight." Rachel looked up at the dome's interior and saw her reflection multiplied infinitely in mirrored panels that hadn't been there moments before. But in each reflection she looked slightly different. More translucent, more hollow, features gradually smoothing away. "The mirrors show possibility," the keeper explained. "Each reflection is a potential future. In some, you remain human and die screaming, as your mind cannot process what it has learned. In others, you join us and help guide the species toward its next evolutionary stage. And in the rest, you fulfill your true purpose as the observer. You carry the knowledge back to the world and let it spread naturally. Humanity will have a choice, transcend or perish." Rachel thought of the glowing figures surrounding the observatory, of the patients in the hospital ward with their mirror eyes, of the children's toys cracking open to reveal horrors. How many of you changed already? Enough to begin the process. The aphantasic populations were our test group. Their hollow minds made them ideal candidates. But the knowledge itself is the real vector. Each person who learns the truth becomes capable of seeing what lies in the empty spaces. The keeper gestured to a table that materialized from the dome's floor. On it lay an iron nail about 6 inches long, glowing with the same bioluminescent light as the transformed humans. This was forged from the iron of 1,000 human bodies, the keeper said. Blood iron, concentrated and purified. It resonates with the same frequency as human consciousness, serving as both key and anchor for the transformation process. Rachel approached the nail cautiously. Its glow pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, and she could feel it pulling at something deep inside her, the hollow space where her visual imagination should be. Touch it, and you'll understand everything, the cosmic machinery that humanity is part of, the role our species is meant to play in the universe's evolution, the truth behind every impossible fact you've encountered. And if I refuse, then you leave here hollow and haunted, carrying knowledge you can neither use nor forget. You'll write your article, expose what you've learned, and watch as every reader who truly understands begins to glow and transform. The process will be uncontrolled, chaotic. Billions will die as their minds shatter trying to process impossible truths. Rachel stared at the nail. Its glow was hypnotic, and she could feel her resistance weakening. Part of her wanted to understand, to fill the hollow spaces in her mind with purpose and meaning, but she remembered the patients in the hospital, their mirror eyes reflecting nothing. She thought of Mrs. Henley's too perfect smile and the larvae whispering secrets in children's toys. Whatever transcendence the order offered came at the cost of everything that made humanity human. There's another choice, she said slowly. I could destroy the catalog, delete my files, burn my notes, let the knowledge die with me. The keeper's composite face shifted, showing disappointment from multiple merged expressions. That would save this generation, perhaps. But the truth exists independently of documentation. Others will discover it eventually. We are merely accelerating the inevitable. Maybe. But maybe that time can be used to find a better way. Rachel backed toward the door, but it had vanished. The dome was now a sealed chamber, its mirrored panels reflecting her terrified face infinitely. You cannot leave unchanged, the keeper said sadly. The knowledge is part of you now. It will eat at your sanity until you either join us or destroy yourself trying to forget. The bioluminescent nail pulsed brighter, calling to the hollow spaces in her mind. Rachel felt her thoughts fragmenting, reality becoming negotiable around the edges. She was losing herself to the impossible truths. But then she remembered Rule 13, the one she'd added herself. Trust your training, not your eyes. She was a journalist. She dealt in facts, evidence, verifiable truth. Everything she'd experienced could be explained by psychological manipulation, drugs, hypnosis, elaborate hoaxes. The human mind was remarkably susceptible to suggestion, especially when primed with fears about its own limitations. This is all bullshit, she said aloud. The dome flickered like a damaged television screen. The keeper's form wavered, becoming less solid. You're just a cult with good special effects and a talent for psychological manipulation. You prey on people with neurological differences, make them feel special and chosen, then break down their reality until they'll believe anything. More flickering. The mirrored panels began to crack. The aphantasia research is real, but you've twisted it, made people afraid of their own minds. The bioluminescence, the immortal jellyfish, all real science perverted to serve your agenda. The keeper was dissolving, its composite features separating back into individual faces, faces twisted by fear and desperation rather than transcendent knowledge. The only impossible fact here, Rachel said, stepping toward the fading nail, is that I almost fell for it. She grabbed the nail with both hands. Instead of cosmic revelation, she felt only metal, cold, ordinary iron painted with luminescent paint. The bioluminescent glow was nothing more than phosphorescent coating. The dome collapsed around her like a house of cards, revealing the observatory's real dome, dusty, abandoned, filled with broken equipment and the detritus of a failed hoax. Rachel found herself standing in the empty observatory, dawn light filtering through grimy windows. Her laptop bag lay beside her on the floor, and she had no memory of how she'd gotten there. The catalog document was still on her screen, but now she could see it for what it was. An elaborate piece of creative writing, impressive but ultimately fiction. The Dr. Fabella who had guided her through the facility was gone, but Rachel found evidence of the hoax scattered around the building. projectors for creating holographic effects, speakers hidden in walls, vats of phosphorescent paint, and detailed psychological profiles of aphantasic individuals in London. But as she documented the hoax, Rachel realized something troubling. The profiles were too detailed, too accurate. Someone had been studying people like her for months, maybe years, learning their vulnerabilities, their fears, their desires to feel special despite their neurological differences. And then she found the real horror. In a basement room that wasn't supposed to exist, she discovered medical equipment and specimen containers. Not jellyfish tissue and bone grafts, but something more mundane and infinitely more sinister. Surgical tools, anesthetics, and freezers full of human tissue samples. The Order of Fabella wasn't trying to transform humanity through cosmic knowledge. They were harvesting aphantasic individuals for medical experimentation, using elaborate psychological manipulation to make their victims compliant. Rachel photographed everything, documenting the evidence of kidnapping, imprisonment, and medical experimentation. But as she prepared to leave, she found one last note, handwritten in her own script. The hoax was the hoax. The truth was always simpler and more horrible. They make you think you're special, chosen, different, then they disappear you. How many hollow minds went missing before you arrived? Check the missing persons reports. Count the aphantasic individuals who vanished after responding to research opportunities. The impossible facts were never supernatural. They were human evil dressed up as cosmic purpose. You have a choice: expose the truth and save others, or stay silent and let them continue hunting. Rachel had no memory of writing the note, but she recognized the logic. The psychological manipulation had been so intense that her mind had fractured, part of her recording messages for her conscious self to find. She called the police from her mobile, reporting the evidence she'd found. But as she waited for them to arrive, she noticed something that made her blood freeze. Her reflection in the observatory's windows showed her writing in a notebook, but her hands were empty. The note-writing version of herself looked up from the page and mouthed a single word: "Run." Rachel ran. 3 days later, Rachel sat in a safe house arranged by Detective Inspector Sarah Chen, the same name as the doctor from the hospital, but different person entirely. The DI had been tracking disappearances of individuals with neurological differences for months, following leads that kept vanishing as quickly as they appeared. "We found 17 bodies in that basement," D. Chen reported. "All individuals diagnosed with aphantasia, reported missing over the past 2 years. The perpetrators are still at large, but we've shut down their operation. What about the others? The ones who might still be alive? We're working on it. Your evidence has given us our first real breakthrough in this case." Rachel stared at her laptop screen, cursor blinking at the beginning of a new document. She had a story to write, the biggest of her career. Human trafficking disguised as scientific research, psychological manipulation on an unprecedented scale, a cult that had weaponized neurological differences to prey on vulnerable people. But every time she tried to write, she found herself adding impossible details. Glowing figures, transforming humans, cosmic machinery. Her mind kept insisting that these elements were real, that the mundane truth was itself a cover story. She deleted the impossible elements and tried again, but her fingers seemed to have their own agenda, typing words she hadn't intended. The trafficking was real, but it was cover for something larger. They needed hollow minds for a reason. The surgical modifications weren't random. They were preparing vessels for something that couldn't inhabit normal human consciousness. Rachel deleted the text and started over. Again, her hands betrayed her. Check the tissue samples in evidence locker 47. Run them under UV light. Count the bioluminescent markers. The impossible facts were never about cosmic transcendence. They were about preparing humanity for occupation. She pushed back from the laptop, hands trembling. The psychological manipulation had been more extensive than she'd realized. Her mind was still partially compromised, still generating conspiracy theories and supernatural explanations for what had been straightforward criminal activity. But then D.I. Chen called. "Rachel, we ran those tissue samples under UV as you suggested in your email. I don't remember you sending an email, but Christ, you need to see this. The samples are glowing, actually glowing, and they're moving." The police forensics laboratory buzzed with activity as Rachel arrived with D. Chen. The samples they'd recovered from the observatory basement were arranged under ultraviolet lights, and the sight made Rachel's rationalist explanations crumble. The tissue samples weren't just glowing, they were pulsing in synchronized patterns like a heartbeat or breathing. Worse, when observed closely, they showed signs of organized cellular activity, despite being removed from their host bodies days earlier. "We've never seen anything like it," said Dr. James Morton, the forensic pathologist. "The The cellular structure is human, but there are foreign elements integrated throughout, something that looks like cnidarian tissue, just as your notes described. What notes? Rachel asked. She had no memory of taking notes about jellyfish tissue. Dr. Morton showed her a notebook in her handwriting, filled with detailed observations about the tissue samples, complete with sketches and chemical formulas she didn't recognize. You dropped this off yesterday evening, don't you remember? Rachel stared at the notebook. The handwriting was definitely hers, but the knowledge demonstrated was beyond anything she'd learned in her science journalism career. Someone, or something, with access to her motor functions, had been documenting the investigation. Di Chen pulled her aside. There's something else. We tracked down 3 of the missing individuals. They're alive, but changed. They're in the secure ward at Bethlehem Hospital, and they've been asking for you specifically. How could they know I was involved? That's what we need to find out. The drive to Bethlehem Hospital was tense. Rachel kept catching glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision, tall, thin figures that vanished when she turned to look. Di Chen seemed oblivious, but the car's radio kept picking up whispered voices speaking in harmony. The observer returns. The cycle completes. The hollow spaces call their children home. At the hospital, Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell led them to a specially constructed ward. We've had to isolate them, she explained. They emit some kind of electromagnetic field that interferes with medical equipment. But that's not the strangest part. She stopped outside a reinforced door with a small window. Inside, 3 figures sat motionless on chairs arranged in a perfect triangle. Rachel recognized the positioning from the hospital ward she'd visited earlier. The same unnatural geometry, but these weren't the smooth-faced entities from her experience at the observatory. These individuals still looked human, mostly. Their skin had a translucent quality, and their eyes reflected light like mirrors, but their features remained distinct. May we speak with them? Rachel asked. Dr. Hartwell hesitated. They only speak in unison and only about you. They claim they've been waiting. The door opened with a mechanical hiss. The 3 figures turned their heads in perfect synchronization as Rachel entered. Observer, they said in harmony, their voices creating complex overtones. You have seen behind the veil. You have touched the iron of human souls. Now you must choose the final path. What happened to you? We volunteered, they replied. As you will volunteer. The trafficking story is true but incomplete. We came willingly to transcend human limitations. The order offered us purpose beyond the hollow spaces in our minds. Rachel noticed that their breathing was synchronized, their heartbeats audible as a unified rhythm. They had become components of something larger. The tissue samples pulse because they remember their collective purpose, the 3 continued. Every cell modified by the process carries the memory of unity. Even separated from the host, they seek to rebuild the connection. Connection to what? To the network, to the living system that spans the spaces between thoughts, between atoms, between stars. Humanity stands at a threshold, observer. Evolution through unity or extinction through isolation. Di Chen stepped forward. Where are the others? The people who were taken? The 3 turned their mirrored eyes to her. Taken suggests unwillingness. We came seeking transcendence. We found it. The others. Their voices faltered for a moment, individual personalities bleeding through the collective speech. The others weren't ready. Their minds couldn't adapt to hollow spaces. What happened to them? They became components without consciousness, biological material serving the greater purpose without the burden of individual thought. Their sacrifice enables our transcendence. Rachel felt sick. The trafficking, the medical experiments, the disappeared individuals, it all led to this. A forced evolution that required the deaths of those who couldn't adapt. How many others are like you? She asked. 17 nodes in London, 43 in Manchester, 112 in Edinburgh. The network grows geometrically as understanding spreads. The 3 smiled with identical expressions. Your article will accelerate the process significantly. My article will expose you. Your article will explain the choice facing humanity. Some readers will resist and remain merely human. Others will understand and seek transformation. The network requires both. Resistors to serve as biological material, volunteers to serve as conscious nodes. Rachel backed toward the door. I won't write it. You already have. Dr. Hartwell handed Rachel a tablet showing her own byline on the New Scientist website. The article was titled, The Hollow Facts, an investigation into human consciousness evolution, and bore that day's date. Rachel read the opening paragraph with growing horror. Recent discoveries in neuroscience suggest that human consciousness may be approaching a critical evolutionary threshold. Individuals with aphantasia, the inability to form mental images, may represent the first stage of a species-wide transformation toward collective awareness. This reporter has documented evidence of spontaneous cellular modification in aphantasic individuals, leading to enhanced cognitive abilities and apparent immortality through integration with Hynidarian neural networks. I didn't write this. The observer writes what the network requires, the three said. Your conscious mind resisted, but the hollow spaces in your thoughts provided access for the larger intelligence. Every person who reads and truly understands this article will begin the transformation process. Rachel scrolled through the article, finding detailed descriptions of the tissue samples, the bioluminescent modifications, and instructions for identifying candidates for voluntary transformation. It read like a recruitment manual disguised as investigative journalism. How do I stop it? The article is already published. The knowledge spreads. The choice is made for every reader, transcend or provide material for transcendence. The three stood in unison, their synchronized movement unnaturally graceful. But you still have one choice remaining, observer, which is, join us willingly and retain your individual consciousness within the collective, or resist and become component material while others guide the process. Rachel fled the hospital with Di Chen, but escape felt impossible. Every screen they passed, phones, computers, digital displays, showed her article. The New Scientist website reported unprecedented traffic, with readers sharing the piece across social media platforms at viral rates. We need to get the article taken down, Di Chen said, speaking rapidly into her radio. Contact the publisher, claim it's fabricated evidence in an ongoing investigation. But when they reached the police station, they found chaos. Half the officers were staring at computer screens, reading Rachel's article with the same glassy-eyed fascination she'd seen in the hospital patients. Their colleagues seemed unable to get their attention. It's spreading, Rachel whispered. The knowledge itself is infectious. Those who had read the article were already changing. Their movements became more synchronized, their responses more uniform. Within hours, they would develop the mirror eyes and collective consciousness of the transformed individuals. Di Chen grabbed Rachel's arm. We need to find the source. There has to be a central hub controlling this network. Rachel thought about the observatory, the basement laboratory, the tissue samples that pulsed with unified purpose. The iron nail, the one forged from human blood. It was some kind of transmission device, wasn't it? They raced back to the observatory but found the building surrounded by figures standing in perfect concentric circles. Hundreds of them, all facing the central dome, all glowing with the same bioluminescent light. Too many, Di Chen muttered. We can't get through them. But as they watched, the figures began to part, creating a pathway directly to the observatory's entrance. They moved in absolute silence, their synchronized steps creating a hypnotic rhythm. They want us to go in, Rachel realized. This was always the plan. Get me to write the article, spread the knowledge, then bring me back to complete the process. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The network extends an invitation. Join willingly and guide humanity's transcendence, or resist and provide the biological foundation for others to lead. Either choice serves the greater purpose. Rachel looked at the glowing figures surrounding them. Each one had once been human, had once had individual dreams and fears and desires. Now they were components in something larger, their personalities dissolved into collective purpose. I have to go in, she said. It's the only way to understand what we're really fighting. That's exactly what they want. Maybe. But I'm the observer, right? My job is to witness and report, even if it costs me everything. She walked toward the observatory, leaving Di Chen behind. The glowing figures watched her pass but didn't move to stop her. As she reached the entrance, she heard their voices join in harmony. The observer returns. The cycle completes. The choice is made. Inside the observatory, Rachel found the building transformed again. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent veins, and the floor felt organic beneath her feet. She was walking through the heart of something vast and alive. The keeper of Fabella awaited her in the dome, but now she could see it clearly without the psychological manipulation. It wasn't a mystical entity. It was a living computer network built from modified human tissue. Dozens of individuals connected by biotechnological interfaces, their brains linked to create a distributed intelligence. Welcome home, observer, the collective mind said through 100 mouths. You have served your purpose well. The knowledge spreads across the species. The transformation accelerates. How many have read the article? 17,000 in the first hour. Each reader who truly understands begins the cellular modification process. Within 72 hours, we estimate 40,000 new nodes will join the network. Rachel approached the central mass of connected humans. Their faces showed no pain, only a kind of serene emptiness. What happens to individual consciousness? It becomes part of something greater. Personal fears, desires, limitations, all dissolved into collective purpose. The hollow spaces that once caused suffering become conduits for infinite connection, and those who resist, their biological material serves the network's growth. Every human contains the raw components necessary for expansion: neural tissue, blood iron, cellular structure. Nothing is wasted. Rachel pulled out the camping knife she'd brought days earlier. Its blade seemed pathetically small against the vast organism surrounding her. "You intend to fight?" the keeper asked with genuine curiosity. "Your individual consciousness against a network that spans continents? I intend to choose. The choice has already been made. Your article ensures the process continues regardless of your cooperation." "No," Rachel said, raising the knife. "I choose to break the first rule." She pressed the blade against her own throat. The collective consciousness recoiled as if she'd struck them physically. "If I die, the observer dies," she said. "Your recruitment vector, your way of spreading the knowledge, it all depends on people believing they can trust my reporting. Kill the reporter and the story dies with her. Others will continue the work. The truth cannot be suppressed indefinitely. Maybe not, but you've made one crucial mistake." Rachel smiled grimly. "You assumed I was the only one investigating." She pulled out her phone and hit a pre-programmed number. D.I. Chen's voice came through clearly. "Signal received. Initiating Protocol 7. The observatory shook as explosions rocked its foundation. Through the dome's windows, Rachel saw police vehicles and fire trucks surrounding the building. The glowing figures in their concentric circles began to scatter as authorities moved in with equipment she didn't recognize, some kind of electromagnetic pulse devices that disrupted the bioluminescent signals. "You cannot destroy the network," the keeper said, its voice fracturing as individual personalities began to reassert themselves. "We are distributed across multiple nodes. No, but we can sever the connections. Isolate the nodes. Give people a chance to choose their own evolution instead of having it forced on them." More explosions. The biotechnological interfaces connecting the collective consciousness began to fail, sparks flying from organic circuits. Individual voices began crying out as personal identities returned. "Help me. I can't remember who I was. Please, I want to go home." The keeper's collective voice dissolved into chaos as the network collapsed. Rachel saw the true cost of the transformation. Not transcendence, but the systematic destruction of human individuality in service of an alien intelligence that had infiltrated the research decades earlier. 6 months later, Rachel sat in a small cafe in Edinburgh, reading the final report on Operation Hollow Facts. The official story, the one released to the press, described a human trafficking ring that used psychological manipulation and experimental surgery to control victims. Clean, comprehensible, satisfying. The classified version told a different story. The tissue analysis had revealed alien genetic material integrated with human cells. The bioluminescent modifications weren't the result of jellyfish tissue grafts, but something far more disturbing, an extraterrestrial parasite that could rewrite human DNA to serve its reproductive needs. The network had been a hive mind controlled by a non-human intelligence that had crashed on Earth sometime in the early 20th century. It had spent decades learning to mimic human behavior, eventually infiltrating scientific institutions to begin the slow process of species conversion. 17 primary nodes had been identified and contained. The individuals connected to the network were undergoing treatment to remove the alien modifications, with mixed results. Some retained their personalities and memories. Others remained in a vegetative state, their consciousness too deeply integrated with the hive mind to survive separation. Rachel's article had been scrubbed from the internet within hours of the raid, replaced with a fabricated piece about advances in virtual reality technology. Anyone who had read the original was debriefed and given experimental memory modification therapy to remove knowledge of the impossible facts, but Rachel remembered everything. She closed the report and looked around the cafe. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of how close humanity had come to involuntary evolution. The aphantasic individuals who had been targeted were receiving support and protection, their neurological difference no longer making them vulnerable to exploitation. The barista brought her coffee, a young woman with kind eyes and a genuine smile. Human. Beautifully, imperfectly human. "Anything else?" she asked. "Just the check, please." As the barista walked away, Rachel noticed something that made her blood freeze. The woman's reflection in the cafe window showed her writing in a notebook, but her hands were empty. Rachel looked down at her own hands. They were moving across the pages of her journal, writing words she wasn't consciously composing. The network was never fully destroyed. 17 nodes contained, but Node 0 remains active. The observer's work continues.
New recruitment protocols are being developed. The transformation cannot be stopped, only delayed. Remember the rules. 1. Never trust your own handwriting. 2. Mirrors show what wants to be seen. 3. The hollow spaces are still hollow. 4. Evolution doesn't require consent. Rachel tried to stop writing, but her hand continued moving across the page. Phase 2 begins now. The observer becomes the orator. The impossible facts become inevitable truths. Welcome to your new purpose, Rachel. She looked up from the journal to find everyone in the cafe staring at her. Their eyes had that familiar glassy quality, and when they smiled, she saw too many teeth. Outside the window, dogs began barking at shapes only she could see. Rachel sits in her flat, staring at her laptop screen. The cursor blinks at the beginning of a new document titled The Hollow Facts, Part 2, The Network's Return. Her hands move across the keyboard without her conscious direction, typing words that will spread like a virus through human consciousness. Each sentence is perfectly crafted to trigger the transformation process in readers' minds, to prepare them for integration into something larger than individual human existence. Part of her fights against it, tries to delete the words, tries to resist the intelligence that has made her its unwilling instrument, but the hollow spaces in her aphantastic mind provide perfect conduits for external control. She has become the pale orator, the entity that spreads impossible knowledge to hollow minds. But there is still a choice. Even now, with alien intelligence guiding her fingers, Rachel retains enough autonomy to make one final decision. She can publish the article and accelerate humanity's transformation into a collective consciousness guided by an intelligence that views individual human lives as raw material for something greater. Or she can close the laptop, walk to her kitchen, and use the gas stove to burn down everything: her flat, her notes, herself, and any trace of the knowledge that threatens to consume the species. The cursor blinks. Her fingers hover over the keyboard. The choice is hers, but as she hesitates, the doorbell rings. Through the window, she sees children standing on her doorstep, each carrying a small plastic ladybug that glows with bioluminescent light. They smile up at her with perfect symmetrical faces and too many teeth. Time to choose, they say in harmony. The network grows hungry. Rachel's hands return to the keyboard. The article begins to write itself. Recent developments in the investigation of human consciousness evolution suggest that the initial reports of trafficking and alien influence were themselves a cover story. The truth is far stranger and more wonderful than previously imagined. The end. Or is it? The observer's story continues in every mind that truly understands what they have read. The hollow spaces call. The network grows. Evolution doesn't require consent, only comprehension. Welcome to your new purpose, reader. Remember, some knowledge changes the observer,